I went out of the court. They're all just pushing. They're all kind of like pushing you against the wall. And I was getting closer and closer to the wall. And I was like,
The wall was getting closer. With every push from the surging crowd behind her, Eala felt herself pinned tighter, shoulder blades pressing against concrete, her father somewhere in the crush, her coach somewhere in the crush, zero security between her and hundreds of fans who had waited hours just to watch her practice at the 2026 Australian Open. She shouted the only words that could save her. "Give me some space, or I'm going to get run over." When the WTA's biggest emerging draw needs security just to walk off a practice court, and nobody arranged it for her, the tennis world has a story it can no longer ignore. What she was carrying before she even stepped on court, Eala arrived at the 2026 Australian Open carrying something considerably heavier than a racket bag. She carried the expectation of an entire nation, a diaspora that stretches from Melbourne to Dubai to New York, filling stadiums with Philippine flags wherever she competes. Her ranking at the time placed her outside the automatic bubble of tour-provided security and heightened protocols. She was a player the crowds treated like a superstar. The system still treated her like everyone else. That disconnect erupted into full view on an outdoor practice court at Melbourne's National Tennis Centre. The setup was routine. Bleachers on both sides. A ramp leading up from court level. No barriers. No bodyguards. No one from the tournament station between Eala and the public. She finished her session, packed up, and stepped toward the exit. What met her was not a line. It was a wave. Fans surged forward, signatures, photographs, a chance to touch the moment. The people at the front could see her face. The people behind them could not see anything at all. And they kept pushing. Eala described it herself on the Players Box podcast in late March. "The traffic of people coming because they wanted me to sign, I couldn't move, and there's a wall back here. They're all just pushing. They're all kind of like pushing you against the wall." I was getting closer and closer to the wall. And I was like, oh, that's kind of dangerous. Her father was there. Her coach was there. Neither could stop physics. The crowd's love had become a literal safety hazard. And nobody from the tour had anticipated it for a player ranked outside the top 30. The pattern nobody can pretend is accidental here is what makes the Melbourne incident more than an isolated scare. It is part of a pattern the tennis world can no longer dismiss. Eala identified the shift herself on that same podcast. "That's another thing I had to get used to, my practices. That's how I knew things had changed. When they're waiting for my practices. Not her matches. Her practices." Fans lining up before she had even started warming up, in city after city, tournament after tournament, Melbourne, Dubai, New York. The demand was not local. It was global. It followed her like a tide regardless of the continent or the time zone, or the ranking implications of the match waiting at the end of the week. Put yourself in the position of any other player at her ranking level. You walk onto a practice court and a handful of people glance up from their phones. You finish, you towel off, you leave. Nobody is waiting. Nobody is pushing. Nobody needs to be told to step back. That is the normal experience for a player ranked in the 40s. Eala's experience is the precise opposite of normal. And the gap between those two realities is the entire point. She described the geographic reach of it herself. New York was big. Melbourne. And Dubai. The Middle East in general has a huge population of Filipinos.
Not a lot of people know that.
Every stop on the calendar that intersects with a significant Filipino community becomes an event within the event. The draw is not simply tennis skill. It is cultural identity walking onto a court with a racket. What Jessica Pegula heard from a hotel room. Jessica Pegula, world number 5 at the time, a player who has competed at the highest level of the sport for years, witnessed it directly in Dubai. On the podcast, she described the moment with visible disbelief. Her coach was inside the hotel. He heard crowd noise coming from somewhere outside. He turned to her and asked what was happening. The answer was Eala's match. Not from inside the stadium. From a building across the street. The noise generated by a single Eala match was audible through hotel walls, and a top 5 player's coach had no idea who was causing it until someone told him. The answer is always Eala. The answer, at tournament after tournament, across 4 continents and a dozen cities in the past 12 months, has been Eala. The peer who said it plainly, Desiree Crouchick, has competed on the WTA Tour for years. She has played Grand Slams, won doubles titles, and seen every level of fandom this sport produces. She co-hosts the Players Box podcast alongside Pegula, Madison Keys, and Jennifer Brady, for women who collectively carry decades of elite professional experience. When Eala told the Melbourne Wall story on air, it was Crouchick who cut directly through her hesitation. "You can ask for security. Just ask." She was incredulous that Eala had not already done so. Eala listened. She requested security for her next practice session, got moved to a main court, and the difference was immediate. Crouchick's reaction afterward was 3 words that carried more weight than any statistic. "You're crazy big here." That line landed differently because of who delivered it. This was not a fan account going viral. This was not a commentator reaching for a headline. This was a peer, a fellow professional who has stood in tunnels and locker rooms and practice courts across the circuit for years, telling Eala directly, to her face, that her level of fame had crossed into territory requiring a different kind of protection. When players inside the elite tier of the sport are the ones validating the phenomenon, the conversation shifts from opinion to consensus. The instinct she cannot suppress through all of it, the wall incident, the overwhelming practice crowds, the noise audible from hotel rooms, Eala's instinct has consistently been to move closer to her fans, not farther away. During the 2026 Miami Open, footage went viral of her overriding her own security to allow fans to approach for photographs and autographs. She did not retreat behind the barrier. She walked past it,
Deliberately.
because she understood that every person holding a Philippine flag in a foreign stadium had traveled a long way to feel seen. And she was not willing to let a security cordon be the thing that told them they did not matter. That is not brand management. That is not a PR strategy developed in a boardroom. That is a 20-year-old who genuinely understands the nature of the relationship she has with her people, and who refuses to let the infrastructure of professional sport reduce it to something transactional. The emotional weight after a loss. Eala's 2026 Australian Open ended in the first round, a loss to Alicia Parks, 6-0, 3-6, 2-6. She walked off the main court in Melbourne having been eliminated from a Grand Slam in the opening round. And then she walked into a crowd that did not care about the scoreline. The fans were still there. The flags were still there. The love did not require a victory as a condition. And she admitted on the podcast that the emotional collision of those two realities, grieving a match on the inside while being embraced on the outside, was something she had never had to process before. She had also hesitated, initially, to request security at all. That was also part of me not accepting it. Why do I need security? I'm going to practice. I don't want to feel like my head is here. She gestured upward, mimicking an inflated ego, and let the sentence trail off. The wall in Melbourne had already finished it for her. She responded the way she always responds. She went to Indian Wells and defeated Coco Gauff. She went to Miami and won 2 matches before falling in the round of 16. The setback did not define the swing. The crowd waiting at practice the following morning defined it. What the sport now has to reckon with. The clay season is here. Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros, 5 tournaments across Europe, where Filipino communities are growing and where Eala's profile is rising in real time. Every single one of those stops now carries the same question that Melbourne answered the hard way. Is the infrastructure ready for the demand she generates? The WTA's expansion into new markets has been a stated institutional priority for years. Eala is delivering that expansion organically, not through corporate partnerships or manufactured campaigns, but through a fan base that shows up, fills seats, buys tickets months in advance, and makes noise that carries through hotel walls. Tournament directors from Indian Wells to Dubai have already witnessed what happens when she is on the schedule. The crowds swell. The atmosphere shifts. The event transforms into something larger than itself. Her ranking sits at 45 as of late March. That number will fluctuate. It always does for a 20-year-old navigating her first full seasons at this level. What will not fluctuate is the size of the crowd waiting for her at practice tomorrow. That demand is locked in. It grows with every tournament, every viral moment, every flag waved in a foreign grandstand by someone who flew 12 hours to be present for it. A concrete wall at the NTC in Melbourne. A voice shouting for space. A world number 5 hearing crowd noise from a hotel room and asking who is causing it. A fellow professional telling a 20-year-old directly, "You're crazy big here." A young woman overriding her own security in Miami because the people holding flags deserve to be met halfway. Alexandra Eala does not simply play tennis in front of fans. She carries an entire nation's pride onto courts that were never designed to hold that much emotion. And the sport now has to build bigger walls, hire more security, and fundamentally rethink what it means when a player ranked 45th draws attention that rivals the top 5. The WTA is not recalibrating because of her ranking. It is recalibrating because her cultural gravity has outgrown every system built to contain it. And the clay season is only just beginning.